Today I want to introduce you to an incredible guy whom I met probably 10 years ago named Paul Natkin, and I call him a rock photographer. He's the real deal, where he was up on the stages with the big greats and captured iconic shots that went big places. So that's how I'm interviewing, and that's how I'm introducing you, Paul. And before we start, I was just trying to remember when you and I met, and I think it was at Shuba's.
We met at Shuba's with Zach Heckendorf.
Yep.
Is that his name?
Yeah. And he's still an artist whom I love, and he just did a very cool thing, actually.
Yeah,
he just produced a song with a hearing impaired guy.
Right.
So yeah, but we were invited to a small gig at Shuba's, and I got placed next to you. Like, I want to sit next to that guy.
You gotta say we were sitting with the president of Aware Records,
right?
Who was buying dinner, which is like almost never happens. It has to be because of you, not because of me.
I doubt it.
But that's how we first met.
Yeah, and I think maybe some XRT guys were there. It was a local radio thing. Yeah. And Shuba's now the iconic small venue in Chicago that's known to break artists. Is closed temporarily, hopefully not forever, because of all of this, right?
Right. And the restaurant we were eating in no longer exists.
I know.
It's now some fancy hoity-toity restaurant.
We don't like those.
That I've never gone to.
The music industry doesn't like that stuff. Like, put us in the back.
It was always great to be able to go to that restaurant and just walk through the hallway into the club when you were done eating.
Exactly. I know. You go back further than me in the industry. When did you start? I'm going to start with, like, who are you? Who is Paul Natkin? In a few words, can you just explain who you are as a kid and a man? And then we'll get into your work.
I'm with the camera.
You're bum with the camera.
Yeah. When I was growing up, my parents, before I was born, my parents were both photographers. And my mother was a product photographer. My father was a photojournalist. And shortly after I was born, my mother made my father quit photography because he was traveling all the time.
Right. And
so all of his stuff was packed up in the basement. And as I was growing up, I used to see his pictures on the walls. He was a brilliant photographer.
Wow.
Probably one of the best that ever came out of Chicago that nobody's ever heard of.
And his name was?
Robert Natkin. If you Google Robert Natkin.
Okay.
There are two Robert Natkins. There's a photographer and there's a painter.
I was going to say like a dentist or something.
No, he's a painter. They both had wives named Judy.
You're kidding.
And the other Robert Natkin lived in New York. I don't know if he's still alive. But
So were you ever allowed to talk about photography, or did your mom want it like not even in the house anymore?
We just never talked about it. The only time he'd ever take the cameras out was around Christmas. He would take a picture of my brother and I and print up a bunch of copies and make Christmas cards out of them.
Oh my God.
And that was it.
And what does a product photographer do? They take pictures of like cans of soup and sofas?
My mother specialized in taking pictures of silver jewelry.
Wow.
She went to the Art Institute. She learned photography, but neither of them took pictures all the time I was growing up. And then when I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was a bum.
What year was that? What 4 years was that?
65 through 69. No, 70 through 70. It wasn't 4 years. I didn't make it 4 years.
Yep.
70 through 73.
70 through 73. I was 71 through 75.
Gotcha.
And,
you look like you're 20 years younger than me.
Yeah, right.
So I was still living with my parents when I was going to college. I was going to UIC.
Yep.
Chicago.
And you're Chicago born and bred, right?
West Rogers Park.
Yep.
And I was my father was a building contractor all the time I was growing up. He built houses on the North Shore. He probably built houses right around where you live. He built room additions and did, renovation on houses and stuff like that. And all the cameras were locked up in the basement. And then in 71, he went bankrupt. He didn't officially declare bankruptcy, but there was no work. It was the Vietnam War. It was the recession, all that stuff.
Right.
So he stayed home and cooked meals and washed the dishes. And my mother went out and got a job at a fabric store in Evanston called Vogue Fabrics.
Vogue Fabric. That's what I was going to say. I know it well.
Yeah, and she used to go there every day and cut fabric for people and wrap it up and put it in bags for people and measure it out.
Yep.
And he was sitting at home doing nothing. And I was sitting at home. I was going to college, but I was really just trying to stay out of the draft.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have to go to Vietnam.
Did you get along with your parents? Was it a good relationship?
It was okay.
Yeah. As much as a college kid can be, right?
Well, I was sponging off of them. I had to get along with them.
Yeah.
And one day my father decided to get out some of his old cameras. And he figured if he wasn't making any money, he might as well not make any money doing something he liked to do. So he just started walking around the neighborhood, taking pictures of people.
Wow.
He taught himself how to develop film again. And there was a full darkroom in the basement of our house.
My God. Yeah.
Cleaned everything up, got new paper, got new chemicals. And so when he was in there, I used to go in there and watch what he was doing because I had nothing else to do. And it was kind of interesting. And then he started calling all of his friends who he knew from back 20 years earlier when he was in the business, asking them if they had any work.
Yeah.
And one of them was a guy named Ben Bentley, who was the publicist for the Chicago Park District.
Mm-hmm.
He was also the publicist for this team you might have heard of called the Chicago Bulls basketball team.
Oh, God.
And and Ben said to him, well, if you want to come to the games, we'll get you a pass. If you take pictures and we like them, we'll buy them from you.
Mm-hmm.
Story has a point. Don't worry. It all comes to a point.
I bet it does.
So he goes to a game, packs his cameras, goes to the game, comes back that night at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm laying on the couch watching TV, and he tells me this story. Number one, free parking right next to the Chicago Stadium. Number two, you get in for free, and you get to get in a door
early.
The general public doesn't go in.
Right.
Basically, the backstage door.
Yep.
It's where we parked in the players' lot, and we walked in where the players walked in.
Oh, my God.
Number three, you get to go upstairs to the press box and have a really good hot meal free. And then number four, the most important part is you get the best seat in the house. You basically walk down and you sit right on the sidelines. You're so close to the game that you have to move out of the way when they take the ball out of bounds under the basket.
Right.
So he told me all of this, and I decided at that moment that I needed to become a photographer because I wanted to get rid of stuff. So he called the Bulls the next day and said, can I have an extra pass for the next game? And we got there early, and I didn't even know how to hold a camera. And he showed me what to look through and what to press, and he set the camera to the right exposure. And I started taking pictures. And the first time I ever held the camera in my hand, I was standing next to a guy named Lou Alcindor, whose name was changed the next year to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And here I am, I'm 5'2", and Kareem was 7'2". And I'm standing looking up at him and taking pictures of him. And
Wow.
And
everybody who goes to photography school and spends a lot of money on camps and all that stuff
don't need
the story.
Don't need any of it.
You don't need any of it.
College should just go out of business.
Yeah. You need an eye though, and somehow that's in your genes.
Two photographers that I was born to, so maybe that works. So I did that for about 4 years, and he got tired of it. He was not interested in it at all.
Right.
So I just got the pass every year and drove down there myself and parked around the corner
Yeah.
went inside, did what I was doing.
So I have a question. I have a question before you keep going. So when you do that, were you taking it to a level of, I want to get the different shot, I want to get the unique shot, or weren't you even at that kind of level yet?
Well, yeah, there are certain rules of sports photography. You have to catch the guy at the peak of the action.
Right.
So in other words, if he's dribbling, the ball has to be right by his hand.
Right.
If the ball is down on the ground, it looks like he just dropped it.
Right.
If he's taking a shot, the ball has to just be leaving his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he's dunking, the ball has to be going through the basket.
Right.
Anything else doesn't matter.
It's like you missed the moment.
So it's called timing.
Right.
That's where I learned timing. Mm-hmm. And then I got to meet all these other photographers that were freelance guys that were going around and shooting all kinds of sporting events. And all of a sudden, I was offered passes to go to Bears games and go on the sidelines and shoot, Cubs games. All of a sudden, I found myself at Wrigley Field sitting in the dugout before the game.
Oh, my God.
I shot a lot of tennis in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the early days, I don't know if you're a tennis fan or not, but guys like Stan Smith and Rod Laver and John Newcomb. And I did tennis for about 4 years. I shot Billie Jean King, Chris Evert, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, all the greats of that era. And here's the point of the story. We're getting to the point of the story.
Da, 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 da.
But I always loved music, and I always loved going to concerts. I used to go to concerts. The Aragon Ballroom used to have 5 bands for $5 every Friday night.
Oh,
and it was usually 2. It was like The Who and Led Zeppelin and 3 local acts.
Oh, jeez. I'm so jealous.
And it was $5. So I used to go every week. It didn't matter who was playing.
And since you're a Chicago guy, born and bred, describe what the Aragon Ballroom was even before those days, before the rock pop acts. It was a dance hall.
It was Frank Sinatra used to play there. They used to have ballroom
orchestra.
It's called the Aragon Ballroom. They used to have ballroom dancing on the dance floor.
So friends of mine whose parents now are like grandparent age, and I'm a grandparent, so I can't believe I just said that, but they would go out dancing with the fancy dress and the white gloves and the big band sound.
What people don't know, when you go to the Aragon and you walk in the door, you're just walking across the floor, but the floor is on springs.
Really?
There's springs under the floor, so it bounces when you dance.
And I hear there's other things down underneath that floor, like during Prohibition, tunnels and things.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, that's the lore. It's fun to think about.
So I used to go to the Aragon. I would go there every Friday night. So.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
But I wasn't shooting pictures. I was just going to go.
Right.
So one day I was at a tennis tournament, outdoor tennis tournament on the Northwestern University campus. It was over about dusk because there were no lights out there. It was, like big names like, John Newcomb, Stan Smith, all those guys. And so I was parked about a block away. So I went back to my car. I put my stuff in the trunk. We're getting to the point. It's getting really close. I get in the car. I start the engine, and WXRT was on the radio. And at that point, WXRT was on the air for 2 hours a day.
You're kidding.
6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night.
And it was was it even the premier AAA channel yet? Or
no, nobody had ever heard of it.
That didn't even exist yet. It was like
it was on for 2 hours. It was on a Polish radio station.
You're kidding me.
They bought 2 hours of time, of airtime.
Jeez.
And put together a rock and roll show. Yep. And they sold advertising to pay for the 2 hours of time. And as I started the engine, this is a story that nobody would ever believe if I didn't swear that it was true. I started the engine, and there was a commercial on the radio for a concert that was happening that night by an unknown blues guitar player by the name of Bonnie Raitt.
Oh, God.
And, but wait, that's not the best part of the story. The concert was taking place 6 feet away from where I was sitting at that moment. I was parked in the parking lot next to the Conn Auditorium at Northwestern. just right on the curve where Sheridan Road goes around.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And I was parked with the dashboard, with the front bumper of my car hitting the building, the Con Auditorium building.
Oh my God.
And the concert was starting in an hour. And so I just figured,
what the hell? It's like some no-name artist.
I've been lying to people for years, telling them who I was not working for, but telling them that my pictures were going to go here and here and here. I'm going to go and lie and try to get into this concert. I didn't really even know who Bonnie Raitt was, but I just knew that,
So you were going to go disguised as a photographer?
Well, I had all my equipment. I took it all out of the bag and I hung it on my shoulders. And I walked to the backstage door and I made up the story on the way about how I was working for this new magazine called Rolling Stone magazine. And I'm supposed to have a pass waiting for me at the desk. And I walk in and I'm ready to tell my lie. And the guy sitting behind the desk looks at me and says, "Oh, you're with the press. Just go in and do whatever you want. Just don't get on stage."
Oh my gosh.
And that's how I became a music photographer.
Oh my God. I never knew that story. As long as I've known you, I didn't know that. And I didn't remember that your parents were photographers. So I'm really glad we're chatting now.
No problem.
So what happened then?
Well, I got home, I developed the film.
And you knew what to do. You knew how to photograph a performance and people who are
different than
moving.
shooting a basketball game.
Well, but there's a big difference. It's probably lower light at a concert than
Not really.
Oh, really?
No, because the spotlights are brighter than at any sporting event.
Right. True.
You're not looking at the whole stage, which is all dark. You're looking at the artist who's lit up with spotlights.
Got it. Okay.
So I figured that out quickly. I went home, developed the film, looked at it, made some prints, said, "Oh, that's nice," and put them in a drawer because I had no idea what to do next.
Right.
So then there was this venue near my house called the Ivanhoe Theater.
Yep.
It's now a Binny's liquor store.
Boo.
It's on the corner of Clark and Wellington.
I mean, I love Binny's, but I'd rather it be a music venue.
Well, so there was a stage and there was like 200 seats and some of the greatest people in the history of music played there.
Oh my God.
And I went there one night and I snuck in the side door and I took a bunch of pictures of, I don't even know who it was. It was just somebody. And as I was leaving, I walked by the dressing rooms and there was a guy sitting outside wearing a T-shirt from a company called Jam Productions.
Yep.
And I had no idea what Jam Productions was, but I figured I'm going to talk to this guy. So he and I bonded over the fact that we're both short and we're both nice Jewish guys from Chicago. And I said, "Well, how do I get access to come here and shoot shows on a regular basis?" And he said, "Well, let me call this guy who manages the place. His name is John Whitecamp, and I'll see what I can do." And there was a phone, there was a house phone on the wall, and he called John Whitecamp, who came down, and this guy's name was Scott Gelman, and he said to John, "Hey, we should give this guy a staff pass to let him come in here whenever he wants. Seems like a nice guy." He'd never seen one of my pictures. He had no idea what I did.
Yeah, because you can't just. Nothing was digital. You weren't just like digital. Pulling up your phone and showing him what you're.
No, you can't show him anything. So Whitecamp goes away, comes back 10 minutes later with this badge that said Ivanhoe Staff on it, and it had a code number on it. And he said, "Just put this on your shirt every time you come over here, and you can do anything you want."
Oh,
and over the course of the next 2 years, I shot Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, Cheech and Chong. The list is endless of people that played there. That was the premier little concert club in Chicago.
Like the early Shubas, the thing where...
No, bigger than that. It's like the early Park West.
Metro or Park West, yeah. Okay.
So one day Scotty introduced me to this guy who was his boss. His name was Jerry Michelson. And Jerry, it was his idea. I would have come up with it eventually. But Jerry said, you should just come to all of our shows.
Yeah.
Which included the Riviera, the Vic wasn't around yet, the Riviera, the Aragon, the Uptown Theater.
Did Park West exist yet? Because that's one of theirs. Okay, yeah.
The Chicago Stadium. And we'll let you into all our shows. All you got to do is give me some pictures from every show.
And at the time, so explain who Jam Productions is. They're like a mini Live Nation. At the time, were they just completely local, Chicago based?
Yeah. Okay. And they weren't even the biggest promoter in town.
Right.
Then I met the guys from Celebration Flipside, who were the biggest promoter in town, and they made me the same deal. So all of a sudden I was going to Soldier Field and shooting the World Series of Rock, which was like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Ted Nugent and, all these big.
Oh, my God. So, Paul, was there no one else like you around? Was it not a thing?
I was the only guy.
So
there were a couple other guys.
Yeah, and bands didn't bring their own photographers, right?
No. Nobody. Musicians were not celebrities.
Right.
It wasn't like movie stars. People Magazine wasn't writing about Kenny Rogers.
Right.
Dolly Parton. They were writing about, Harrison Ford.
And I'm wondering when Rolling Stone Magazine just launched. Like, was it in the early 70s?
Early 70s. They were the first magazine to write about music. Then all the teen magazines came about.
Yeah.
16 and 17 and Teen Beat.
Heartthrob. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to work for all of them.
Oh my God.
And then the rock and roll magazines came around. There were 3 of them. There was Cream, Hit Parader, and Circus. And
so
they each had a different
your name got around.
Well, it took a while to get to that point.
Yeah,
at that point, the only place I was working for was the Illinois Entertainer.
Yep.
Which paid $5 a photograph.
Oh, God.
Which doesn't even pay for a roll of film. I was working for the Reader, Chicago Reader, which
underground magazine, sort of.
Reader paid $50 a photo.
Yeah.
That was okay. But, they would do 1 article a week, maybe use 2 photos if I was lucky. And shooting a lot of shows and getting this archive going, which luckily from the beginning I kept in really good order.
I want to talk about the archive in a minute. I have a couple insert questions.
Okay.
So what was your dad saying during all this? Was he like, you're going to that rock and roll, this is gonna change?
No, he didn't care. He didn't care.
Well, he was an artist, so he probably valued it.
Well, no, but do you want to get into this deep?
Well, yeah. And then the other thing, the main question I have too is, you were using real film that costs money. And so it wasn't like take 1,000 shots of the same thing and pick your two
I was
favorites.
using my father's cameras, which I borrowed, which I was using for free.
And I guess developing them yourself.
Developing them myself and shooting mostly black and white. And I used to buy film in 100-foot rolls.
Oh, my God.
And you get this little black machine that you go in the darkroom and you put the 100-foot roll in the machine with one end sticking out. And then you load your own cassettes of film. You had empty cassettes. So I would click off 36 exposures and then I'd cut it and do another one, tape it to the reel. And so it was costing me 30 cents a roll as opposed to $2 a roll if I bought a roll of film in a box.
Right.
So it wasn't really costing that much money. But I had no idea how to earn a living doing it.
Exactly.
My father could have cared less because he was a journalist and his MO was he would take a camera and he'd walk down the street and he'd look for somebody to photograph. He would stop and have a conversation with them.
So it was the story. It was the story side.
And then he would ask them if he could take a picture. And he'd get in really close, like this far away, with a wide-angle lens, and he'd shoot their faces and their hands and, all that kind of stuff. What I was doing didn't interest him at all because I wasn't having any interaction with the artists.
Yep.
I was just going and shooting what happened on stage.
Yep. You were a different storyteller. You were the support but actually the most important part of the story.
I was documenting a thing happening. He was interacting with people and photographing them.
Yeah.
And so he had no interest in what I was doing.
Yep.
So meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out how to earn a living doing this. At that point, I was working in a photo lab.
Yeah.
So at least when I shot
not at a Walgreens.
No, I was working in a place called Gamma, which is the biggest photo lab in Chicago. And
at this point, has anyone seen your work, or your work's down in the basement?
Other than the Reader and the Illinois Entertainer, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
And did they give you props? Was it a time when they gave the photographer props at the bottom?
Well, you got a credit.
You got a credit.
But nobody read credits, so nobody cared about that stuff.
Yeah.
But when I started shooting color and I was working at Gamma, I would go at night when I got done with a concert. I'd go, and they had a night crew that used to develop film there, and they were all friends of mine. So I would I would call them, like ring the night buzzer, and I'd say, hey, can you do me a favor and put this on the line and develop it when you're doing other people's work? And then just leave it in my dark room that I use during the day there. So I come in the next day and all my film would be developed for free.
Did you worry that anybody would steal any of it or take it as theirs or none of that?
No, they didn't care. They wouldn't even look at it. They would just
they're just doing their job.
Put an envelope and put my name on it and done. So remember, Jerry Michelson told me I could shoot all of his shows, and eventually Park West opened up. And
one of my favorite venues. I love that venue. It's wide. It's wide and not deep. So your vantage point of the stage is great. And even when I go to a show there, I'm like up in the balcony, down right, down left. I'm everywhere because it's very easy to digest.
Yeah, it's a great place. So Jam started booking it. So I started shooting at all the shows. I basically had carte blanche, just show up at the show and go in and shoot what you want. And one day I was shooting a show there, and about halfway through the show, I came out in the lobby, and this friend of mine was there. She was a lawyer in town, and she's from Detroit originally. And she had this guy that she was talking to. She motioned me over and said, I want to introduce you to this guy. And his name was Charlie Oranger, and he was the art director for Cream Magazine, which was based in Birmingham, Michigan.
Wow.
So I immediately said to Charlie, hey, how do I get my pictures in your magazine? Being very forward, as I usually am. And he said, you got to have
balls. You got to have balls, or else everybody wants this job. Everybody wants something in music, right?
Exactly. So he handed me a business card, and he said, call me on the 15th of the month, and we'll give you a list of everybody we're doing articles about, and you could submit photos to us, and if we use anything, we'll pay you for it. So took the card, put it in my pocket, went about my business, called on the 15th of the month. He gave me a list of about 10 artists, and I had 2 of them. And so I sent him some pictures, and he used a picture of mine of Rick Derringer. Do you know who Rick Derringer is?
Yeah. Yep.
He used it full page color picture in the magazine.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, okay, I'm rich now. This is the start of I'm going to be a millionaire soon. And then about a week after the magazine came out, I got the check. And it was less than what I got for a black and white picture in the Reader. It was $35. So I figured, okay, I gotta sell a lot of pictures if I want to make some money.
Yep.
So I went to 7-Eleven around the corner from my house.
And they can do that because if you don't take it, the next guy will.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to 7-Eleven and I bought one each of every magazine in the newsstand. And they all have a little thing in the beginning of the magazine with a list of the people that work there and the address of their office and the phone number of their office. So I looked up the art director of each one of them one at a time. And I called him up and I said, hey, I'm a photographer from Chicago. I want to contribute to your magazine. And the first 2 I tried were Hit Parader and Cream and Circus. And they both said, yeah, same thing. 15th of the month, call us. We'll send you a list, send us pictures. And all of a sudden I was getting 2 to 3 pictures in each one of those magazines every month. And I was still shooting every night. It didn't matter who it was. It could be a heavy metal band. It could be a folk act. It could be a comedian.
Yeah.
It could be Liberace. It didn't matter. It was just taking pictures.
You're building your library.
Yeah, and keeping track of them in file cabinets. And
I have a question. At that time, when a lot of those acts were new, did some of those photos have an expiration date? Like, quote unquote, like at some point would it be like, we need one that's newer? Whereas
all the
now,
time. Still to this day. Except now they all want the old pictures.
Now they all want the old ones.
Well, yeah. But in those days, I had to shoot these bands every time they came to town.
Right.
And I built up a relationship with these bands.
Well, that was my next question. Because you weren't schmoozing with the bands like your dad would schmooze with his subject.
I was at that point.
But at that point, so we want to hear about that too.
Well, first of all, I met a publicist from New York. Mm-hmm. She worked for CBS Records, for Columbia Records. Her name is still to this day Marilyn Laverty, and she saw my work and she liked it, and she had an act come into town playing at a club called Beginnings, which was out in Schaumburg in a shopping mall, and it was a girl named Rachel Sweet, who was Britney Spears before there was a Britney Spears. And Rolling Stone wanted to do an article about Rachel Sweet. So Marilyn recommended that they hire me to take pictures of the show to go with the article. So I went out there, I shot pictures, I sent them to Rolling Stone, they used them. She liked them. And she started calling me whenever one of her acts was in town and saying, hey, do you want to come and shoot? And her main act that she worked with was this guy you might have heard of. His name was Bruce Springsteen. And all of a sudden, I was getting access every time Bruce Springsteen would come to town. He would play 2 nights at the Uptown Theater. I would shoot anything I wanted for both nights. Meanwhile, she quit Sony, or Columbia, and she started her own company, which is called Shorefire Media. And she took Bruce with her, and he's been her client ever since.
Oh, my God, Paul.
I've always had access since then.
Wow.
So, up to when he played Wrigley Field a couple years ago. So,
oh, my God.
So I started meeting other publicists who gave me the same props. It's like, hey, you're good. We like your work. You got to shoot our bands. And a lot of them were these unknown bands that I would go and shoot more as a favor. But some of those unknown bands became Pat Benatar, Loverboy, Hall & Oates, that whole era. And then I got involved in the hair metal era.
Did you?
And they started asking me to shoot offstage pictures too. Not just concerts.
Yeah, like could you go in the green rooms and that kind of thing, or were those things pretty off limits?
Oh, no, I could go anywhere I wanted, if I was working for them or working with them.
Right.
So I would, usually in the beginning I would I had a flash in my camera bag. I put it on the camera. I go in, like the one that I always describe is I went to shoot Ted Nugent at the Rosemont Horizon, which is now called the Allstate Arena. And the opening act was this unknown band by the name of Bon Jovi. And the publicist had called me and said, hey, can you take some pictures of these guys? They're going to be really big someday.
Right.
And most of the time when a publicist says that, you take it with a grain of salt because nobody's ever going to hear from them again.
Yeah, so that's what they want. That's their job.
I went backstage. The dressing rooms were really ugly. So I walked into the shower. It was a locker room. And I walked in the shower and it had those nice brick tiles. So I said, hey, guys, when you're ready to go on stage, give me 5 minutes and just come on in the shower. And I stuck them again, not with the shower on, but I stuck them against the wall with the flash on the camera and took a bunch of pictures of them, which still sell to this day. Because it's, John Bon Jovi with the big hair and everybody wearing spandex and ripped jeans and tiger stripe shirts and all that stuff. And
in a shower.
So I became friends with the guys in Bon Jovi and have been ever since. And it actually got to the point where it kind of destroyed my relationship with my brother because I had to sneak out of his wedding so I could go to the Rosemont Horizon and shoot Bon Jovi.
Paul.
Because if I would have not gone, they would have forgotten about me by the next time they came to town.
Oh my God.
So I don't think his wife, even to this day, knows that I snuck out of the back of the tent behind their house and got in my car and drove out to Rosemont to shoot Bon Jovi.
Oh my God, Paul. Well, they'll probably forgive you, but hopefully
No, she won't. She won't, trust me. That's a whole nother story.
That's another chapter. So nowadays, I know when I get press passes to go, to things at festivals and concerts and stuff, there's always a photographer pass. It's different than a press pass. You have more access. And I think
not always, sometimes less access.
But I think what I always read now is you get the first 3 songs. Why is that? A, is that a thing? B, did it used to not be that way? And why is that?
Well, in the beginning, I would just go to the show. I'd start shooting when the show started. When the house lights came up at the end of the show, I was done. There was never any question that I'd shoot whatever I wanted. And the best part of the show was at the end of the show. Yeah. That's when the show builds to a climax.
The encores and the fans, nobody wants it to end. Right.
So in the early 80s, there are a lot of, everybody's got different ideas of why this happened. I have 2 stories that are both really good. One of them is that when MTV came along, everybody wanted to look like their videos. And after about 3 or 4 songs, all their hairspray was washed out, their makeup was running. And
so the bands, the artists are the freshest in the early. So
the only thing they wanted to shoot was when they looked like their MTV videos. The story that I have always heard was that in 1983, Bruce Springsteen was playing at Madison Square Garden, and there were 100 photographers there. There's always like a pack of photographers. Most of them didn't know what they were doing, so they had to use a flash. Because it's the only way if you're not good enough to know what the lighting is like and how to adjust for it, you have to use a flash. So he walked out on stage and he was blinded by all the flashes. And at intermission, he walked off stage and he went up to his road manager and said, I can't concentrate on singing. We have to do something about this starting tomorrow. So after the show, they had a meeting and they decided there were one of 2 things that could have happened. The good thing that could have happened, which didn't, was for them to decide, let's tell everybody they can't use a flash. That would have solved the whole problem. The bad thing, which they did choose, was let's just let everybody shoot for 15 minutes and then make them all leave. And then the rest of the show, you won't be bothered with it. That's the one they decided on. And that sort of stuck. Well, it stuck with a couple of acts. Somebody else heard about that and said, oh, yeah, we got to get rid of those pesky photographers and their flashes. And it slowly, over the course of the 80s, became standard operating procedure. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it became, you can only shoot 3 songs of any show anywhere. Yeah. And I used to pride myself on being able to get really good shots in those 3 songs, but I was really just kidding myself because I was getting the same pictures that everybody else in America was getting. And then the rules started getting worse. There was my favorite moment was I went to a show at the UIC Pavilion. It was Eddie Murphy. Yeah. And we all got our photo passes. We're all standing in the photo pit. And the road manager comes in and he says, okay, everybody gather around. And he gave us these instructions, which I've never forgotten this. I have it word for word in my brain. He said, the house lights are going to come up. We're going to go down. Eddie's going to walk out on stage and bask in the adulation of the audience for between 30 seconds and 1 minute. And then he's going to walk over to the microphone and put his hand on the microphone. And at that point, you have to stop shooting.
Wow.
And I'm very outspoken, like I don't really like
You don't do good. You don't do well with rules.
So there were about 20
guidelines.
photographers around, and everybody's standing there like, okay, no problem, we'll be ready. And I looked at the guy and I said, "You're kidding, right?" And he said, "No, I'm serious." And I had the pass sticking on my shirt, and I pulled the pass off and handed it back to him and said, "I'm going home." And I
believe that. I've seen you in action.
And
good for you.
And so that rule doesn't work.
Yeah.
But then it got worse. In the early 90s, all the old people, all the old artists decided that the only way we could keep from them seeing our wrinkles is if we make people shoot from the back of the arena. You can still only shoot 3 songs, but you have to shoot from the soundboard, which in the hockey arena is like shooting from half a block away.
I know.
So
when you zoom, does it make everything fuzzy?
No, if you have the right equipment, you could get an okay shot. You can't get a great shot.
Right.
But you can get something. More than likely, it's going to have people's hands in the shot.
Yes.
It's gonna look like you shot from the audience.
Yeah.
And that was the moment when I decided that I didn't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was like early 90s, 92, 93. And I drew a line in the sand. I'm not going to shoot unless I could do it my way.
It's like they put all these margins around the artist. You, the artist, the photographer artist. Well, they gave you too many margins.
Somebody that I admired greatly, there's a photographer by the name of Jim Marshall. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of him, but don't know him.
He's the greatest music photographer that ever lived. He took the famous picture of Johnny Cash giving the finger.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I've heard of him.
Yeah. He took the last pictures ever of the Beatles when they were leaving the stage in San Francisco after their final concert. He's my hero. And he was in town one day, and we went out to lunch, and he said, "Do you put up with that 3 songs crap?" And he used a stronger word than crap. And I said, "Well, you kind of have to." And he said, and I quote, I'm not going to use the word, but he said, "You're an effing moron." And he said it really loudly in a really quiet restaurant. And I looked at him.
You like your lunches too. You like your lunches and dinners. You love to eat.
So I looked at him like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "When you let them dictate where you shoot from and how much you can shoot, they're not your pictures anymore."
Right.
They're their pictures. All you're doing is you're recording what they tell you to record. So
So did you?
I went home and it was a Saturday, and there were a bunch of football games on TV. So I was laying on the couch watching football, and I'm thinking to myself, he's right. And the following Monday morning, I got up, and Monday morning was ritualistically the day that I would pick up the weekend's reader and see who was playing that week in town.
Yep.
And I would call all the publicists and say, "Can you get me access to photograph so-and-so?"
Yep.
And it set up my whole week. So I started calling publicists that day, and I said, "We've got to change things a little bit. I won't go unless I can shoot the whole show." And I thought these people really respected me, and they were going to say, "Oh yeah, for you, no problem." And at that moment, I lost 95% of my work. I went from shooting 10 bands a week to shooting maybe 3 a month. And it never came back.
Well, and I want to interject here because there's another thing that started to happen. I don't remember the year that the iPhone came out, but I know you and I have talked about that change in the world when all of a sudden anyone could take a good photo, or bands.
Anybody can take a photo, not a good photo.
A photo. Or bands, roadies, or band zone tour managers were filming and I remember you
Or
saying
they just
to
take
me
a
once,
selfie.
yeah, or they just take a selfie. And I remember you once saying that's when the world changed,
Well, when I
especially for
started looking
you.
around the photo pit and half the photographers were shooting with iPhones.
Oh my God.
And they had the same access that I had. And the only reason they were doing it is because they wanted to get into the concerts for free.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
They were working for a webzine that didn't pay them any money for pictures. And it was a sad moment.
I know, like the death of an era. So how easy was it to edit your old photos? Were there even ways to edit other than lighting in the dark room versus editing everything now? Like nothing's even real. What do you think about all that?
I use the word edit differently than you use it.
Mm-hmm.
People these days in this world use editing to mean going into Photoshop and changing things.
Right.
My editing to me was I would shoot a roll of film. They were color slides. I'd put them all out in a light box and I'd pick. Editing was editing out all the bad ones.
It was curating.
And I would throw away all the out of focus ones. I'd only keep the A and B material.
Yeah.
When you say edit, what you mean by editing is...
I mean augment or quote enhance or put filters on or...
I don't use any. I don't do any filters or stuff, things like that. There's a famous statement in the recording world that the engineer's sitting behind the recording desk and the guy sings a vocal and it's really terrible. And when it's over, he shuts off the machine and he goes to the microphone and he says, that was great. Come on in, we'll fix it in the mix. And to my way of thinking, that's what editing a photo in Photoshop is doing.
I know.
It's taking a photograph that's not very good and trying to make it better. And my way of thinking is you should shoot it right from the beginning.
Yeah. It's the eye. It's the human eye.
But it's also the technical knowledge to know what the light is doing, to know that there's no shadow from the microphone on the guy's face.
Right.
All those things that you have to think of instantaneously. Whereas if you're only shooting 3 songs, all you're doing is holding down the button and shooting as many pictures as you can, trying to get one that might work.
And everyone else's looks the same as yours, except for they might be from different angles, but
they're probably all from within 3 feet of each other.
Right, exactly. Wow, it's just insane. And it's the same thing with auto-tune and all of that in the music industry. I'm sure the old greats are like, nah, it's not really music. You have too many tools, Well,
in the old days, if you wanted a guitar solo on a song, you learned the guitar solo.
Yep.
And then you went in the studio and you played it 3 times and you said, okay, I like number 2. And you put it in. Today you play it 100 times and you take 2 notes from this one, 3 notes from that one, and you build the guitar solo in the studio, and you could never reproduce that in real life.
Absolutely. I walked into a restaurant a month ago downtown, and they have a bunch of your work on the wall. It's a restaurant that I love. All of a sudden I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but they're Beatrix. There are 2 of them. And the one over
it's actually 6 of them.
Okay, 6 of them. I go to 2 of them, but they've got a lot of rock, really cool musician shots along the wall. And I just was attracted to them, and I got up and it said Paul Natkin on every one. And I'm like, I called you or texted you.
Well, one of the coolest guys that you could know in the city of Chicago is a guy by the name of Rich Melman.
Yes.
Who owns a company called Let Us Entertain You.
Which has how many restaurants?
Has 100.
Yeah.
And he's going to eventually build 25 Beatrixes.
Is he really?
All around the country.
Oh my God.
Every one of them is going to have my pictures in them.
Seriously? So, I mean, your archives are very, very, very valuable. Do you have a favorite couple of shots that your eye just thinks were your best work? Or is that a trick? Was that too hard of a question?
they're all hanging on the wall, but you can't see them from here. And my computer's too heavy to turn around.
Damn.
The most famous picture I ever took.
You know what? Take a few snapshots of those after our talk, and I'm going to splice them in somehow to the video, okay?
The most famous picture I ever took was an accident. It's a picture of Ozzy Osbourne holding his guitar player, Randy Rhoads, up in the air.
Oh, my God.
And I took it in 1982. And about a month after I took it, Randy Rhoads died in a plane crash.
Oh, I remember you telling me.
And there's only like 3 people that ever took pictures of him. And this is definitely the best one. It endeared me to Sharon Osbourne forever.
Wow. Oh, my God.
And that picture has been on an album cover. It's been on T-shirts. I'm looking at a snowboard, a limited edition snowboard that they made using that picture on the deck of the snowboard.
Oh, my God. Wow. Any others? Any others that you're especially proud of? Well, you must be proud of all of them, but
I'll photograph all of these. There's one of Pete Townsend jumping through the air.
Photograph all of them, and it can just literally be on your iPhone. And I think what we'll do is we'll do like a flip reel at the front end of this. I mean, this will be a podcast audio, but we also are going to have the video version of this. So that would be really fun for people to see. Okay.
Then there's a picture I took of Bob Marley at the Uptown Theater back in 1978, I think it was. It's a picture of Willie Nelson from one of the Farm Aids that I shot. And there's a picture of Prince that I photographed at his birthday party in Minneapolis in 1984.
Oh, my God, Paul. I
have those on the wall because those are my favorite.
Yeah, those are your favorite. So did you travel much for work, or did you stay in Illinois? I mean, we have so many venues, and because we're in the middle of the country, touring bands all stop here. So that's
great,
what's nice.
Except that when a band starts on the East Coast, they don't get here for a month. So
I see.
The magazines have already written the articles. So a lot of times I would in those days, you could get on a plane and fly anywhere.
Yeah.
For under $200.
Wow, that's true.
So I used to I'd fly to Miami, I'd fly to Boston, I'd fly to New York, I'd fly to Philadelphia, and just shoot a show and come back the next day.
That's true. It never dawned on me that if you're halfway through their tour, it's older news.
Even if my pictures were better than the ones that were taken on the coast, they had them first.
Was there any venue that you never got to shoot that you would have loved? Like, did you ever get to Red Rocks or any of the iconic? I
never got to Red Rocks. I would have liked to, maybe one day. It's still around. But most of them, I shot in Madison Square Garden a bunch of times. I shot at the what's the place in, I can't remember. You can't even remember the name of some of these places.
Oh, I know. I'm the same way.
All the different places in LA, I shot at all those.
Yeah. Hotel Cafe and the little ones all the way to the big ones.
No, never the little ones. I was always there. I wouldn't travel across the country for a band that wasn't like a major star.
Right. Oh, what's the big one? Sunset. No, I mean, Mark and I saw Tom Petty there. Hollywood Bowl.
I shot there. The Palladium in LA. There's a new release of Keith Richards' concert from the Palladium in 1988. Wow. And I was the tour photographer on his tour. So, and they just released it's a DVD and a CD of that concert. I'm sure I'm on the DVD somewhere, back in my head.
So I was going to ask you if you ever toured with any band. So were you on the bus with them and or in the car behind or something like that?
No, I figured you got to start right at the top. It doesn't pay to start driving around in a van with 3 smelly guys. Totally. That doesn't really appeal to me all that much.
Right.
So my next door neighbor at the time in the 80s was the rock critic for the Chicago Sun-Times.
Nice.
And he called me up one day and he said, I'm going to New York to interview Keith Richards. It's when his first solo album came out. It's called Talk is Cheap.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's called The Expensive Winos. That was the first one. So this was September of 88. So he said, sometimes it's too cheap to send a photographer. So if you want to go, we'll buy some pictures from you.
Yeah.
So I went to New York with him, slept on the couch in his hotel room, got up the next morning. We went to Keith's manager's office, walked in the door, and there's Keith Richards standing there, my idol. That's another picture I've got on the wall here.
Yeah, I've seen that. I know that one.
So I set up my stuff in the corner, and I did a 5-minute photo shoot with him.
Wow.
And then I said, okay, you're done. And he went over to be interviewed by Don. And in the course of the interview, he said, Don asked him if he was going to go out on tour to support this album. It wasn't a Stones album.
Yeah.
He had a whole new band that he was working with. And he said, yeah, we're going out between Thanksgiving and Christmas of 1988, that year. So I just filed that away in my head. And I went home. I made a bunch of prints for the Sun-Times. And I made an extra set, and I sent them to his manager with a note saying, hey, if you need a tour photographer, give me a call. Had no idea how you do that.
Yeah.
I'd never been on a tour bus in my life. And so the day before Thanksgiving, my phone rings, and it's Keith's manager. And she says, so what are you doing tomorrow?
Oh, my God.
And I said, well, I was going to my mother's house for Thanksgiving. And she said, no, pack up your stuff and fly to Atlanta. And when you land, get in a cab and come to the Ritz-Carlton and call me.
Oh, my God, Paul.
And I spent a month on the road riding around on a tour bus with Keith Richards and the Expensive Winos. And
are you going to write a book someday?
It's coming out in May.
Is it really?
It's mostly pictures.
Bravo. What's it called?
We don't have a title for it yet.
Oh, my God.
We're editing.
But it's going to be like a coffee table book, I hope.
Yeah.
So you've been busy, buddy.
I haven't had any free time during this pandemic.
I know. Well, it's a creative's like nirvana to be sort of stuck at home and, it's a good time to pull out some of our old projects, right?
So the next part of the story is I get home, it's around Christmas. The final show was on Keith's birthday, which is December 19th. So I get home the next day, and there's a month's worth of mail piled up in my entranceway at my house, including the first issue of Rolling Stone for 1989. And Random Notes had a little piece that the Stones were getting back together and they were going to tour later on that year. So I sent the same note to Keith's manager. Hey, if you need a tour photographer, give me a call.
Yeah.
And just forgot about it. And all of a sudden I started hearing on the radio that the Stones were starting their tour on the East Coast, and nobody called me. So I figured, okay, did the Keith Richards tour. I'm happy. That was it. And about a month into the tour, I got a call from Keith's manager, and she said, what are you doing tomorrow? And
can you give me a little more notice, please?
And I said, well, you don't ask questions.
No, I know. Believe me, I know.
And I said, well, I'm guessing I'm probably coming to meet you somewhere. And she said, okay, get on a plane tomorrow morning, fly to Boston, come to the Ritz-Carlton, call me when you get here. And she said, you need to do a month on our tour. So.
Oh my God, Paul.
So I did. I got there the first day. I flew from Chicago to Boston, dropped my luggage off with the luggage guy on the tour, waited in the lobby, got in a van with the Rolling Stones, went out to Foxborough, which is where the Patriots used to play.
Yeah.
Did a show, got back in a van at the end of the show with a police escort out to the airport, got on a private jet with the Rolling Stones and flew to Birmingham, Alabama. That's one day. That's the first day. And so I figured, okay, a month of this is going to be a lot of fun. And about 3 weeks into it, I get a call in my room. We're in New York in the middle of doing 4 days at Shea Stadium. And I get a call from Keith's manager. And she says, hey, can you come up to my room? And I'm figuring, okay, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
It's like being called to the principal's office. So I go up there, and she's sitting there with Mick's manager and the publicist for the tour. So here I am, I'm called into 3 principals' offices at the same time. And I'm thinking, okay, I have a little bit of time to pack when I get back to my room, and I'm going to catch a plane back to Chicago. I'm done. And they said to me, you know what, we have a problem. And I said, what? And they said, well, number 1, your work is really great. And number 2, everybody in the band really likes you. So you have to do the whole tour, which was another 2.5 months.
Wow.
So I went from planning on being away for a month to being away for 3.5 months on what was at that point
What year would that, did you say that was 88?
89.
89. Okay.
It was the Steel Wheels tour, which at that point was the biggest rock tour in the history of music. And then, and the rest is history. And you know what? You're
such a humble guy. You're not a dick.
Well, what am I going to say?
Well, I remember when I first met you, I was really new in the industry, and I just remember thinking, this guy's so humble, but the stories that are coming out of his mouth seem like super legit. So those 2 things seem like an oxymoron to me. That's why I was attracted to you right away. I really liked you right away. I just felt like it didn't affect you. You are who you are, and something didn't affect you.
I still go home alone and watch TV when I'm not working,
Yeah,
I have no life other than working.
I know. I'm the same way. I mean, it's just, it's crazy, but oh my God, I'm looking at my notes. Okay. So I do have one question I wanted to ask. So this whole but one little intervene here. It's just one incredible thing after another, one incredible story, one incredible piece of luck or whatever, things that fell into your path. Did you ever have a really bad day? And I don't mean like all of a sudden the industry shut down or anything, but was there ever an artist who just was really hard to deal with and didn't value what you did? Or was there ever a time when you thought you had film in the camera, then you didn't? Did anything bad like that ever?
That part never happened, but
my biggest nightmare.
I was never a Boy Scout, but I liked the idea of being prepared. So even if I'm going out to shoot a little show in a club, I would always bring minimum 20 rolls of film. Because you never know, what if Keith Richards shows up and jams with the band?
I know.
Well,
and I've noticed that just with everything I've done in the industry, from live events to interviews and things, the tech people, and I throw you into that category, the ones who have to document or roll the tape or, record the sound. You guys are you're like operational meisters. You arrive early, you have all your stuff, and you're really calm. Like, I just feel like there's so much riding on your work, but yet you're sort of calm. Your sport.
Well, once
you're calm, you're in the zone.
Once you've been standing on the front of the stage at a Rolling Stones concert in a football stadium, and you realize that there are 80,000 people behind you and the greatest rock and roll band in the world in front of you, there's not much that could shake me up after that.
Have you ever fallen?
No.
You've never fallen or slipped? Did you ever have to shoot in the rain?
Hardly ever.
Yeah.
We were all supplied official Rolling Stones raincoats.
Yeah, I wondered. It was like a parachute thing over your camera. And
some of those shows were really cold. They tried to plan it so that the northern cities were either in domes or in September. But there were times when I'd have to wear like 2 sweatshirts and a jacket.
Well, a lot of the venues are cold. I know the Aragon. When I go there now, if I tell anybody to go to the Aragon or the Vic, I'm like, if it's in the winter, you better wear socks and you better bring gloves and hat, because I swear they don't turn on the heat.
Well, they figure the 5,000 people in the room are
correct.
It up.
But I've been at. So, have you done many or any music festivals where you're running from stage to stage and carrying all your stuff on your back?
The answer is no. But
those are rough.
The first part of the answer is yes. Back in the early days of festivals, I always thought it would be really important to cover those. mainly because I go and spend 1 day or 2 days or 3 days and acquire pictures of 40 or 50 artists.
Exactly.
So the first festival I ever covered was this thing called the US Festival, which was in Ontario, California, which is out in the desert outside of LA.
Yeah.
And it was put on by a guy named Steve Wozniak, who was one of the founders of Apple.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-day festival. The 1 day was all punk music, and the headliner was The Clash.
Yeah.
The next day was all metal, and the headliner was Van Halen. And the third day it was rock, and the headliner was David Bowie.
That's interesting to divide the days by genre.
Yeah. And
nobody does that now. It's pretty cool.
It's like everybody who was anybody, but it was all in one place.
Right.
So you go there in the beginning of the day, and the only time you have to move is if
how many stages? Just one at each end?
One stage.
One stage, okay.
And so the only time you had to move is if you had to go backstage if somebody was giving a press conference.
Right.
Then you go and shoot the press conference, go back to where you were. So that was 3 days of the list of people that played there was unbelievable. U2 played like early in the day because they were so unknown that they played like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
They were a baby band?
Yeah. The first 2 bands of the heavy metal day, I was the only photographer that actually got up in time to get out there for these because somebody had told me they were both going to be really big, were Quiet Riot and Motley Crue.
Oh, my God.
Who were basically bar bands in Los Angeles. That they went out at 11 o'clock and noon.
What year was this then? The US
83
festival?
I want to say.
Okay, 83.
And then after that, the next one I shot was Live Aid.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia,
wow.
which was 1 day, 1 stage, 74 bands.
There must have been a lot of festivals at Live Aid and a lot of television coverage, right? Just because of its...
Well, it was broadcast live on MTV.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of photographers, but we all had a good position, and we, basically other than to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
We never left the platform because,
God. Who fed you? When did you eat and drink water? I would have been worried. I'm always the mother.
We were all staying in the same hotel, and we went back and ordered pizza at midnight.
Yeah.
Really god-awful Domino's pizza. But it tasted really good.
It does when you're starving.
Every once in a while, I'd go backstage and I'd grab something out of one of the performers.
Yeah. When I'm in the press tents at like Lollapalooza or the big festivals, watching the camera guys carry their stuff on their back in the beating heat, and they're going amongst 9 stages all day long for 3 days, I think, oh my God,
Well,
I've
never been to Lollapalooza. I have no intention of ever going there. I'm
going to take you someday. I'm going to kidnap you, and we're going to go. Because I'll keep you safe.
I did go
and
once.
I'll take you to some really good music. You'll love it.
I did go once. Buddy guy used to manage this little kid by the name of Quinn Sullivan.
Yeah.
He was like 9 years old, and he got booked on the kids stage at Lollapalooza. So Buddy's manager called me up and said, hey, do you want to come with us? We're going
to the family stage.
And Buddy's going to come and jam with them. So,
whoa.
So I went down to Buddy's club, which is really right across the street. It's a couple blocks away. And waited with Quinn and his band and Buddy. And Lollapalooza sent a van over to get us. And they took us around to the lake shore.
The lakeside. So you could come in the back.
And we came in the back door right by the kids' stage. Yeah. And we got out of the van, and the kid went on stage and played, and I shot him for an hour. And then we got back in the van and went back to the club, and I went home. It's the only time I've ever been to Lollapalooza.
I'm trying to think when Lollapalooza started, because I know they had their 20th or 25th anniversary a couple years ago. So
Lollapalooza used to be a traveling,
yeah.
Yeah, and I would go every once in a while, but it was at that point that I started not wanting to shoot if I couldn't shoot the whole show.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure the festivals were definitely first 3 songs.
So as a matter, you did more walking than anything, because after 3 songs, they kicked you out and they brought you to a place where you couldn't even see the stage. because
I know.
God forbid somebody would shoot a picture after the first 3 songs were over. And
they put you in a photographer's pen.
They would put us in jail, basically. And I don't like being treated that way. I feel like
it's a disrespect for your art.
Well, but it's also my birthday's in 3 days, and I'm going to be 66 years old. And in my old age, I just feel like I deserve to be treated a little better than that.
I do too. I think our wisdom and our years has earned us some respect.
The only time I'd go to Lollapalooza is if I knew one of the bands.
Yeah.
Like I went when Living Colour played, and I just hung out in their dressing room and didn't shoot anybody else the whole day.
Yeah.
And one year I went. So
have you ever? Did you come up to our music fest ever? To the Natkin Music Fest?
No,
you have to come.
I should.
Come up because you'll just be in the VIP lounge, drinking and eating with the others.
I don't care about that. I just care about having access.
I know, me too.
The only thing I care about.
Yeah, and it's September 10th and 11th this year. Used to be Father's Day weekend, and we're bumping it, but hopefully you can come and we can breathe on each other.
No problem. Okay? So one year, there was a band in Chicago called Jesus Lizard.
Mm-hmm.
They were a punk band, and they came over to my house once to do a photo shoot for a magazine cover. And afterwards, we started talking, and the singer asked me very innocently, why is it that right when our show starts getting really good, all the photographers leave?
Yeah.
And it's because every security guy at every venue in the United States has been programmed to kick everybody out after 3 songs. So I said to him, well, that's not up to them. That's up to you. And if you want people to stay, all you got to do is have your road manager tell the Lollapalooza people to make sure to let everybody shoot the whole show. So I went out to Lollapalooza that year, and my pass was waiting at the box office, and there was a note in it that said, you're allowed to shoot the first 3 songs of every band except for Jesus Lizard, who has requested that everybody shoot their entire show.
Wow.
So I went and shot them, and I went home and just skipped everybody else.
You should. I mean, that could be a thing. You could be the wise person who helps.
Well, but here's the end of that story. So I called my friend who lives in New York, who's like the #1 living music photographer in the world right now. Mm-hmm. Her name is Yvette Roberts, EBET, and she works for this little publication called the New York Times. And she was going to shoot Lollapalooza the following week out on Long Island at Jones Beach. So I said, hey, make sure that you get there early because there's a Chicago band that's playing and they're letting everybody shoot the whole show.
Wow.
So she went out there and she same little note in her pass, 3 songs of every band except Jesus Lizard, who wants you to shoot the whole show. So she goes in the pit, and the last song of their set, David Yao, the singer, dives off the stage right over her head, and the audience catches him in their hands, and she turns around, and he's laying on his back singing, and the sun is setting behind him. And he gets the perfect picture. And it appeared not on the front page of the art section of the New York Times, on the front page of the freaking New York Times, period.
She's forever indebted to you.
Well, it's not her. She's had the front page of the New York Times before. But think about Jesus Lizard. They were the second band on the bill that day. Red Hot Chili Peppers played like 5 hours later. They didn't get the coverage that Jesus Lizard got because that guy asked me that offhand question in my living room.
You know what?
As he was trying to steal a beer out of my refrigerator.
I love it. You know what? I bet most bands don't know that they can override that stupid rule.
All right, I could keep on going for another 4 hours, but you tell me when to stop. But
well, I'm looking at the time, and obviously we're like, at an hour and a half or an hour and 20?
Yeah.
And I think what I would love to do is give me 2 seconds to look over my notes. I could talk to you forever.
Let me tell you one more quick story.
This is so good that we could do another one another time, but keep, what do you want to tell me?
So it's on the same subject.
Yeah.
So I used to work for a company called Shure Microphones.
Yeah.
Which I used to photograph their endorsers. And they sent me to the Riviera one night to photograph a band called Young the Giant.
Oh, God.
It was the first time they played in Chicago.
Yeah, that was
I had never
probably
heard of
within the past, 5 or 8 years or something?
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I had never heard of them. I figured they were the opening act.
You need to go. You need to follow Val's list. You would have known who they were.
I don't shoot anymore, so it doesn't matter, but I will follow you. So I turn the corner and it says Young the Giant sold out. And I'm thinking, wow, these guys must be a big deal. So I go and get my photo pass, and I went backstage to get the road manager to clear me to shoot the whole show because Young the Giant, the singer, was using a different microphone for the encores. And that was the one that Shure wanted me to photograph him singing into.
Ah.
So I go and find the guy backstage in this little hallway, and I say, hey, listen, you got to clear me to shoot the whole show. And he says, oh, no, we can't do that. We only let people shoot the first 3 songs. And there's a guy standing there next to us. And he turns to the road manager and he says, why is that? Why do we only let people shoot 3 songs? I had no idea that it was the singer from the band.
Right.
So the guy says, well, I got to check with the promoter and make sure that it's okay. So I said, okay, Nick is right down the hall in his office. Let's go and ask him. So we walked down the hall. Do you know Nick Miller?
Yeah, I know who he is.
So he lives right near you.
Yeah.
So Nick is in his office, and the road manager says, this guy says that he wants to shoot the whole show. And Nick looks at him. He says, he can do anything he wants. So I shot the whole show. I got the best pictures were the encores. Because they had gone to a thrift store that day and bought all these old funky 60s clothes, which they put on for the encores, where they were using the microphone that I needed to photograph.
Jeez.
So the next morning I get up and I sent like 6 JPEGs to their manager in New York. And the phone rings like 2 minutes later, and he says, how'd you get these pictures? And I said, well, I have to tell you, but when I was taking those pictures, all the other photographers were already home on their couches watching the news.
Yep.
And he says, well, why do we only let people shoot 3 songs? And I said, well, it's up to you. You got to change that. And he says, well, I think you guys make too much money off of us. And I said, well, are you sitting in front of your computer right now? And he said, yeah. And I said, I'm going to send you my latest sales report from Getty, which is my agents. So I sent him the sales report. It's a spreadsheet. And the final column on the spreadsheet is how much I make from each picture. I said, okay, I want you to open that spreadsheet, and I want you to go to the far right and look at that final column. And that's how much I make per picture. And he said, okay, I'm doing it right now. And all I hear is silence at the other end of the line. And finally I hear, I'm not going to swear again, but I could, oh my effing God.
Yeah.
And because more than half the pictures that I sell through Getty, I make under $2 per picture.
God, and Getty.
But I sell a ton of them.
Yeah, but Getty has to. How does that work? So, but they're the keeper of the catalog. They're the agent for you.
I've got 40,000 pictures up on Getty,
and there's
people from all over the world can just go on. You go to GettyImages.com.
Yeah. And they're probably thinking, well, a lot of people will use those or reproduce those, and so it will add up. But
well, it does add up. I mean, my last sales report was 62 pages long. Wow. And it was a very nice sum of money. But most of those pictures were under $2.
Paul, do you think right now with the pandemic and with everybody trending toward comfort, oldies?
Yeah, I'm doing great this year. This is my best year in a long time.
Oh, my God. Who knew? Who would have thought?
But there's a final part of the story. So he looks at it and he sees like all these pictures that I'm selling for. There was actually something in every sales report where my share of the sale is 3 cents.
God.
And he looks at it, he says, well, I guess I was wrong about you guys making a lot of money. What can we do? And I said, well, first of all, call your road manager and tell them starting tomorrow, all photographers get to shoot the whole show. And he said,
you're like
okay.
changing, you're revolutionizing things and going.
Yeah, but that's 2 out of 1,000 bands.
Still.
And it'll never happen again. But I went to the show the following year. They got really big. They played at Northerly Island, and there were like 10 photographers there. And the road manager came out before the show and pointed to me and said, you could thank him for the fact that you all get to shoot the whole show tonight.
So it's good for the photographers if you can shoot the whole show, right? It doesn't become
because you wait for things to happen.
You wait for things to happen, and there's more opportunity over 2 hours of a show versus, 13 minutes of 3 songs. 3 hours, or the encores that happen that, where the crazy things happen.
Okay, in a Rolling Stones show, do you think Mick and Keith ever get together before the final third of the show?
I know.
The stage is the size of Shuba's, and they're on either side of the stage for the whole show. How do you get a picture of the two of them together? You wait for them to get together.
Wait for them.
Which they do like 2 times during the show. That's it.
And anybody who even has photography as a hobby knows you have to wait. You have to wait. You got to wait for the moment just when you're ready to put it down. Like, keep holding it up, because
there's a photographer in the 19th century. His name was Henri Cartier-Bresson. He was a French photographer. He's the greatest photojournalist in the history of photography. And he wrote a book in like 1902 that I would love to get someday, but it's the only copy I've ever seen on eBay is like $300.
Oh, wow.
It's been out of print for years, but the title of the book is The Decisive Moment.
Yep.
And his theory is, in any event, there's one decisive moment. And your job is to capture that. There are other moments that are good, but there's one that's better than everything else. And you have to be ready to capture that. And it doesn't happen during the first 3 songs.
So here's what we should do. Let's team up on something. I had in my question number 7 was about the 3-song thing. Most people would not even know about that. And I wanted to ask you about that. And I didn't realize till now, like, how much of a thing that is, and what a big, and then I never really went all the way to think, God, all the moments that were missed and the opportunities of the show, and the best stuff toward the end, when the crowd is hyped and the fans, now the relationship between stage and fan has been established. In the first 3, the band's just giving it to the audience and they're not giving back yet. I mean, it's just like it's like a relationship that hasn't developed yet. It has to go further, deeper in. And I'm like, I feel like writing a blog post about this. Maybe we could change the industry, you and me.
I've been trying for like 20 years now, and I haven't had much success. But I will say this. Part of it, it's about the relationship between the band and the audience, but it's also about the history. And there was a case about 5 years ago when Beyonce was touring, and her rule was photographers could shoot the first 30 seconds of the show.
Oh, God.
And so all the photographers were back at the soundboard with their really long lenses, all ready to go. And she walked out on stage every night, wearing the same dress every night. And she stood in the middle of the stage with her hands at her side for 30 seconds. And that was the only thing that photographers could shoot. And then they were all escorted, not just off the platform, they were escorted out of the building and told to go home. They couldn't even stay and watch the show if they wanted to.
Because they couldn't be trusted. But you know what? You know what the sick irony is of all this? Once the real photographers leave, then guess what's getting captured? The fans.
All the cell phones.
The fans. No cell phones.
Right. No, all the cell phones.
All the cell phones. Yeah, there are a few artists who say no, but then it's the crappy stuff that's going all over the place from every layperson on the planet. It strips the talent of the photographers from what they know and making art beautiful. And that's another blog I want to write. I feel like everybody's on a stage now. It's like, how do we even separate the real talent from like the lay people who think they're everything? It's making me sick. Another talk.
I make a lot of my living off of re-releases of albums and box sets and greatest hits albums. Now, what's going to happen 10 years from now when Beyonce puts out her greatest hits box set and they put out a call for photographs from whatever year that was, 2006.
Yeah.
And every photo they get is exactly the same.
I know.
That's, what are you going to do?
I know.
You can't fight City Hall, so I don't know.
Well, and if it's all youngsters running the industry, they haven't lived long enough to figure this out.
Oh, yeah.
I always need to do a little millennial bash in there, which even I have 4 children who are millennials, and they're like, could you not lead every comment with you millennials?
Well, you're right, though.
Yeah, then they okay boomer me back. Oh, my kids don't do that to me, but they like to do that.
My friend Marilyn, who owns Shorefire Media, she's got 20 people working for her, and there are a couple that are in their 40s, but most of them are in their early 20s. And she was in town one day for a wedding, and we had lunch that day. And I said, hey, how do I get your people to understand that they should let me shoot the whole show? And she said, well, try writing a letter to them and copy me on it, and I'll talk to them. And it took me a year of writing to her people before I got them to finally hold a meeting and say, okay, from now on, whenever we can, we're going to let them shoot the whole show.
I think it should be up to the artist.
Well, if it's up to the artist, nobody would be allowed to shoot at all.
Why? Really?
Because God forbid that somebody would, make money off of them.
I see.
It's got to be up to the publicist who is paid by the artist, paid a lot of money by the artist, to tell them what they should be doing to get more publicity. And good pictures will take a 1-page story and turn it into a 3-page story.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Well, you know what? There's hope for us. We can. I don't know. Sometimes I think the smallest voice, which would be mine, sometimes can, get a conversation started. And that's why I love writing. My blog is always about from the fan point of view, or from the fan point of view.
Yeah.
Not always from the promoter's point of view or the, whatever. So I have loved this chat. I am so happy to catch up with you, Paul. I mean, you are really one of the few most remarkable people I know in the industry. And I was so lucky that day to sit next to you at lunch. And you always are like, let's go to lunch. Let's go to lunch. Let's go to dinner. So perfect.
Cool. Keep me posted.
I will. Take care. Good night.
Bye.